From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today out of Oklahoma State University, Derrell Peel with this week's cattle market analysis. Among many other things he'll cover, Derrell will share an update on the recovery in beef slaughter capacity. Then K-State's Glynn Tonsor goes over his new report on U.S. beef export and import trends since 2003, which lends to the pandemic dialogue over the beef industry. Also, we'll have comments from the 3 Kansas FFA members who were named State Star Farmer, Star in Agribusiness, and Star in Agricultural Placement at the virtual Kansas FFA State Convention. And Jeff Wickman with this week's 4-H segment. He'll talk with K-State's Amy Sollock about virtual 4-H camp. All that here on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, our Monday edition, and thanks for being along with us. To the cattle markets now, as we visit with livestock economist Derrell Peel of Oklahoma State University. And Derrell, we've quite an assortment of things we want to touch upon today, but let's start with the quick recap of last week's trade. Fed cattle, live trade, well, the bids, they were pretty widely ranging, while the futures markets were coming back pretty appreciably until the very end of the week.
That's right. Obviously the cash market is still kind of hit or miss on a localized level. We're still trying to sort out these markets on almost a plant-by-plant basis in some sense. Futures market, I think, is coming around to the idea that, we're holding pretty steady in terms of this cash market in a fairly wide range. And so I think the futures market is likely going to move, more towards that cash market as we move through the month of June on this nearby contract.
Yeah, and that's been the interesting thing to watch, cash trading premium to futures for a while, but you think that that's soon to be at an end and we'll see a meeting of the minds, if you will?
Well, they, of course, will come together. They have to, but sometimes it is a question of whether cash is going to wind up where the futures thinks that it is at this point, or whether the futures winds up coming to cash. I think there's a decent chance in this case that the futures will come closer to the cash market. We'll meet somewhere in the middle, but it may be closer to the current cash level.
Well, of course, the ongoing interest is in slaughter capacity reopening and feeding the demand for beef that's out there, and it's a substantial demand as we come to find. But what's the latest on progress in hiking those slaughter volumes?
We've made remarkable progress, I think faster than some people really thought. Of course, packers have a tremendous incentive to get that capacity back online just as quick as is really practical for them. This week's estimated slaughter has cattle slaughter at about 89% of last year, and the estimated weekly beef production total is actually about 92% of the same week a year ago. Of course, it was a holiday week, but they were both holiday weeks. And the reason the beef production estimate is so much higher than the slaughter estimate from 89 to 92% is the fact that the carcass weights, because we do have a lot of backed up fed cattle right now, are really pushing higher at a time of year when they normally are moving to a seasonal low. So we've got these steer and heifer carcass weights anywhere from steers are 52 pounds heavier than last year. Heifers are about 43 pounds heavier than this time last year.
Now, to put those numbers in an impressive context, if you think about those heavier weights at that average, that level, if you equate that to animals on the hoof, those numbers are rather startling, Derrell.
If you use last year's carcass weights and figure the difference in the beef production, the heavier carcass weights this year are the equivalent of adding about 30,000 head to this week's slaughter at last year's carcass weights. So it's like getting more slaughter if the carcass weights were closer to seasonal levels, and that's helping us in the short run. We still have these localized and sporadic shortages in the market right now, but we're going to rapidly fill that gap gap in the next couple of weeks.
So bringing that up, is that something of a red flag as far as currentness in the market going forward then?
Well, I think, there's two sides to it. Obviously, on the consumer side, we're anxious to get that product back in the stores in a reliable fashion, and I think we're going to get there pretty quickly. Again, in the next couple of weeks, we'll see most of that be taken care of. On the fed cattle side, the feedlot side, we do have a significant backlog of cattle, and even when we get capacity back up as high as we're going to get it, it's going to be a slow process, I think, for a number of weeks at a minimum, and perhaps even months before we get fully caught up with this backlog of cattle and really get back to what we would call current from the standpoint of the feedlot situation.
All right. Well, on the demand side, boxed beef prices continue to retreat after reaching those astronomically high record levels a few weeks back. When will that pull back in boxed beef prices stop? Or is there any way to tell, Derrell?
Well, I really don't know that there is any way to tell. I mean, it's going to come down, certainly quite a bit more from where it's at. We started, if I remember the numbers right, we started this kind of run up back in March with a choice box beef level of around 222, and it had been higher than that early in the year. So it's going to come down, into the low $3 a pound range probably, and we may see quite a bit of volatility in that going forward because we've got these supply dynamics at work. We're also going to have some demand dynamics as we bring food service back online. We switch some demand away from grocery stores back to food service. And at some point, the reality of unemployment probably kicks in a bigger way, and that may be a little bit of a wet blanket on all of the demand.
Mm-hmm. However, it's not to sound an alarm here about demand, is it? For it's borne out well throughout the COVID crisis and otherwise, right?
Oh, certainly up to this point, it has held up really well, both domestic and the international component in terms of exports. We do expect some dampening of that just because of the sort of macroeconomic situation. I don't know that it's a major alarm yet, but it's certainly something that we have to keep an eye on just to see kind of how that plays out in the second half of the year.
Well, speaking of the export scene, let's hone in on one particular situation, and that is the growing political tensions with China and the possible impact of disagreements and the negative give and take between the two countries on beef and pork exports, for that matter, to China. How worrisome is that for beef and red meat in general?
Well, politics always worries me because it's even harder than markets to figure out in some sense. But, in general, I know the market, broadly speaking, is very nervous from the stock market down through, most of the agricultural markets, at least in terms of the futures, very nervous about the potential here. The practical side of the thing from a protein standpoint is that China still has a tremendous protein deficit. Obviously we've been exporting tremendous amounts of pork there. We're hoping to see beef exports grow. Poultry exports have grown as well. And I think at the end of the day, we'll probably still export quite a bit of protein because that's one of their most critical needs. So politics aside, I think probably that demand will still be there. It may get moderated a little bit in all of this, but probably doesn't take as much hit as maybe some other things do if we get into some sort of a real tussle between the two countries politically.
You put together some information recently that we wanted to pass along as well to producers about the feedstuff and hay supply outlook and what that may mean to a producer's bottom line in as far as the expenses they would incur on feedstuffs. And let's start on the hay side and where we stand in terms of supplies, which is rather reassuring from the producer's vantage point.
And certainly in total, USDA estimated May 1 hay stocks at, 37%, I think it was, above year-ago levels, across the whole country. And if you look at many regions, it was pretty much the same. Probably the tightest region in all of that was really kind of the southeast. So from Tennessee, sort of south and east, there was some states that were down on a year-over-year basis. In terms of the southern plains, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas, that region generally had very abundant supplies. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. At the moment, most of the pasture conditions in the central plains and from there east look pretty good, moisture conditions. There is some drought out west that's a little bit alarming from western Kansas across Colorado and some of that country.
So hay prices should be manageable for producers if everything holds true to form here.
I think the hay prices will be, flat to perhaps slightly down on a year-over-year basis. So yes, that's going to help. And of course, in terms of the feed grain side of things, from a feedlot perspective, and then down into feeder cattle markets, we've got lots of feed grain. We've got lots of corn. We're projecting ending stocks for the end of this crop year, which would be the end of August, at very high levels, 2.8 billion plus or minus, and even bigger stocks a year from now. So it seems likely that we're going to have very favorable feed grain and supplemental feed prices, whether you're using that directly or whether you're seeing that in terms of the support that will provide to feeder cattle markets by keeping those feedlot ration costs in check a little bit.
When you compare that to the longer-term cattle price outlook, this is, as far as a profitability situation goes, is imperative for producers to have these feed costs in check.
That's for sure. Obviously we're on the defensive kind of from the revenue side of things. Those cost savings are going to be very critical to helping reduce the negative impact of this year or provide any possible opportunity for some profitability.
Well, lastly, and narrowing it down to this coming trading week, what would you anticipate will happen, Derrell?
Well, with the progress we've made on the capacity side, USDA puts out their daily estimated slaughter, and for the last week or 10 days, they've underestimated what actually happened, and that's a good sign. That means we're making progress even faster than expected. That said, there's still a big backlog, and so that's going to weigh on this fed cattle market and really kind of, keep it in check. I wouldn't look for necessarily any weakness to speak of, but I certainly don't see much potential for higher prices at that level. Feeder cattle markets, we've seen kind of a slow grind in feeder cattle prices in recent weeks with a lot of volatility around that to somewhat higher levels. So, we may continue to see a little bit of progress in that respect.
Very well then, and as always, your insight appreciated. Take care. We'll catch up with you again soon, Derrell. Thanks.
You bet. We'll be in touch.
He's Derrell Peel, livestock economist, Oklahoma State University, providing this week's cattle market commentary, and you're listening to Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
Keeping your distance from others is important in slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are some fun things to do alone. Read a book, take a walk, unpack your suitcase from that trip you took last September, paint a self-portrait, catch up on a TV series, do a puzzle. Remember, we should all stay home to lower the risk for everyone. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone-together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Agriculture Today continues now, and more for you cattle producers, this time from a livestock economist with K-State Research and Extension. We brought Glynn Tonsor back in. For Glynn's been hard at it of late, assessing from several angles the economic influence of the coronavirus situation in this country, and he's put out some articles of interest toward that end that we will pull from today in this conversation. Glynn, we understand that there has been fallout from COVID impacting all of agriculture, narrowing it down even further, the cattle industry. One of the things you recently did was took a look at the export and import trends for beef in this country over multiple years' time. What led you to want to put this particular analysis together?
Sure. So as you note, we're going through lots of transition, and lots of folks, both within and outside of this meat and livestock industry more broadly, are asking questions on why we do what we do. Implicit in some of those inquiries is, what is the role of exports? What is the role of imports? What predominance do they hold in the industry? How has that changed over time? A lot of those kind of questions are front and center of some of those related policy debates. So what I was hoping to do with this particular fact sheet was to give some of that historical context. And to do that, I purposely kind of stopped the summary before COVID to separate what COVID effects might be going on, because we could all sit here and speculate how many of those are temporary versus permanent. And the fact sheet looks at the year 2003 as a benchmark year. The cow that stole Christmas, December of 2003, is relevant here. That's when I start, and I compare it through 2019. I start 2003 because that BSE event, trade of beef products in particular, was notably shot for the subsequent years following that. And it sets the stage for how 2003 and 19 compare, what we can learn by making those comparisons, and in some sense, how we entered 2020.
So that's the premise behind this specific article. When you look at trends, how do you define those trends? What path do you follow to get to those?
Yeah, I mean, there's several ways to do that. What I try to summarize here is what's total U.S. beef production, and then break that down on how much of that's coming from imports, how much exports are quote unquote taken away from that, and what's the relative shares. That's the stuff I'm doing in this particular fact sheet. And for those that are really interested in this, you got to see some of the figures and so forth and dive in. But I will kind of summarize those trends that show up visually. And probably the biggest change that happened over that period of time is on the volume of exports. So exports fell out of bed, so to speak, right after the BSE event. And from a low in 04, almost persistently through 2019, there's a few hiccups along the way, but there's strong growth. We went from losing almost 80% of our exports because of BSE to actually, by the time we got to 2019, we were about 20% higher just on sheer volume of beef exports than we were in 03. Conversely, when we break down the volume of imports, we have ebbs and flows over time. Same deal. There's volatility in the role of imports here in the volume. But actually, by the time we got to 2019, the aggregate volume of beef being imported was very similar, within 1% of what it was in 03. The net of those changes on the amount of beef being produced and how much consumers are consuming here in the U.S. is washed out. So the amount of meat that's available, beef specifically here in 2019, was very similar to what we had in 03. Of course, we grew the herd, shrink the herd over time, and then we have these import and export kind of adjustments underway. But what I was really trying to impress on people was we ended, by the time we got to 2019, with very similar volume of imports as in 03 and about 20% higher exports than we had in 03, despite the loss of basically all our trading partners except Canada and Mexico because of the BSE event.
That focuses on volume, but you also in this write-up look at value of those exports, which is, of course, a huge chunk of this story.
Exactly. So, I ended there with a 20% volume increase, and I literally use a subheading in this fact sheet that the importance of export value is hidden in volume statistics, exactly like you asked me, Eric, and that's an important part. So not only has the volume went up, the economic importance has went up more than that because the value contribution has went up. And specifically, I'll give us two numbers to kind of get our arms around here. USMEF, United States Meat Export Federation, estimates the value that exports add on every steer that's slaughtered in the U.S. And for 2019, that's just below $310. Now, to put that in context, that's more than double what it was before BSE, which was $136 and change. And it's more than 10 times the value we had in 04. Now, remember, 04 was kind of the low mark in the story for exports because we only exported basically with Canada and Mexico. And in 04, that per head value is $30.50. So we've had like a 10x growth in the contribution to value of fed steers since 04. That's very good. Obviously, I highlight the importance of that in different ways. One of the ways I highlighted in this particular fact sheet was to show the trend, the relationship between that value per head growing and the actual fed cattle price that's received by producers. For my fellow stat geeks out there, those two numbers are positively correlated with a 0.88 correlation statistic. That's a very strong fit. And that's not surprising to me, is over time, the importance of exports has grown. And that shows up in the form of higher fed cattle prices than we would have if we hadn't grown those exports.
So those numbers say something definitively about the importance of beef trade. So what's the message as it ties back into some of the questions that have arisen about that trade within the context of the COVID impact on the industry?
Sure. First and foremost, I think it's important to recognize that we raise live animals that give us a host of products, and those products find their way to the market that is most valuable, that is open to them. So as long as we have market access outside of the U.S., some of those products are going to go there because they're more valuable. The extreme example is tongue I always use, but there's a whole host of products that are worth more outside the U.S. than in it. That's the argument for maintaining exports. The argument for maintaining imports is we can add value to some of our cuts here at home, products here at home, by purposely bringing others in and blending them. And the bulk of the import activity, typically in the beef industry, is importing highly lean, think 90% lean product from Australia, New Zealand, other sources of that, and mixing with our 50% trim product that's produced here domestically in large volumes to support a larger ground beef production system. Embedded in that answer is different beef products go different places, and economics drive us in the production of those. And I'm trying to illustrate that aggregate volume of imports is similar in 19 as it was in 03. The value importance of exports has grown, and we need to let those markets work, so to speak. How is that related to COVID? Because of the massive economic shocks that are around COVID, it's human nature, and this has happened in the past, to question the roles of imports in particular, and maybe underestimate the importance of exports while we're at it on accident. And I have a fear that we may actually do economic harm in the spirit of trying to help an industry recover from obviously massive damages.
All of what Glynn has talked about right here is in that article entitled An Overview of U.S. Beef Production, Export, Import, and Domestic Consumption Trends. It's at agmanager.info. And you mentioned massive economic shocks. That actually leads us into the other article that you have at that same website. You looked at the Kansas livestock industry's COVID-19 economic damage assessment. And those numbers jump right off the page, Glynn.
Yeah, they do. And I'll take the bottom line number and then kind of break it down and try to paraphrase what's going on here. But, in the middle of May, I did this estimate using some numbers that were actually pulled together early in April. I highlight that because it's a dynamic situation and these numbers obviously change every day. But the punchline, when you add up the Kansas beef cattle sector, which is cow-calf, background, or feedlot separately, and then the Kansas hog sector, you come up with a number of $1.6 billion is the estimate on the COVID impact. Decompose that for a moment. The cattle side, we have per head damage estimates that actually come from a study I collaborated on from Derrell down at Oklahoma State, led a project, me, he, and 7 others were on. I took those along with estimates on how large the Kansas cattle industry is to come up with the Kansas cattle damages, and basically did the same thing on the hog side, but the source of the per head damage estimates is different. There, I was using estimates from Iowa State University. So I took those estimates on the per head damage, brought in the Kansas inventory size, and came in with a Kansas hog industry damage. I really want to impress on folks, that was $1.6 billion. I think that has improved since this was released. So this particular fact sheet was posted, middle of May, used some estimates that were dated earlier in April. Certainly the processing sector is operating better and more thoroughly today than it was. We're not past the euthanization challenges on the hog side at all. So that pressure hasn't eased per se as much, but the cattle flow is improving almost by the hour here. So we no doubt have large damages. I'm optimistic they're not 1.6 billion anymore. That was a snapshot best effort at the time. But all that said, they are still large, and that's consistent with ongoing calls for additional federal aid. Lots of discussion this past week. My colleagues, broke down how the past federal aid packages work and so forth. And in no small part, that's because we're talking billions, not millions of damages to just one state.
And you continue, in closing here, Glynn, to refine and update these numbers as they come along because of the changes. So folks should be on the watch for more.
Yes, and I encourage them just in general to go to our agmanager.info website regularly. You can sign up and get a weekly email update. That's the best way to do that. I'm highlighting that because it's not just my stuff. I mean, it is getting posted there, but I have a lot of colleagues that are contributing to this broader topic. That's a very rational spot for interested listeners to watch for updates.
Resources aplenty there, agmanager.info. And Glynn, as always, thanks for your time and your input.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Livestock economist Glynn Tonsor, K-State Research and Extension, on this part of Agriculture Today, with more coming your way after the break over the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson back with you. Well, the annual Kansas FFA State Convention took place as scheduled this past Wednesday through Friday. This 92nd edition, though, with a bit of a different twist, of course, as it was conducted virtually. And it culminated with the Friday evening session, which recognized several individual FFA members for high achievements. They were selected as the Kansas FFA State Stars for this year, and here we'll tell you about them. Iola FFA member Levi Mivas was recognized as the State Star Farmer on the basis of Levi's supervised agricultural experience in poultry production.
I care for about 67 hens and sell 25 dozen eggs a week to customers around the area. I began raising chickens with my family, and as it's progressed, I've kind of taken over the business. And in 2019, I officially licensed it as Mivas Poultry Farm. This license by the Kansas Department of Agriculture allowed me to commercially sell to grocery stores and restaurants, which significantly expanded my customer base and allowed me to grow my business exponentially. Another way that I've expanded since I've started is selling started pullets. I buy them as day-old chicks from Minnesota, and as they're shipped down here, I raise them until they're about 3 to 5 months old, and then sell them to others in the area who want to start their own flock, but they don't want to deal with all of the equipment, specialty feed, brooders, heat lamps, and all of the other things that go into raising young chicks. So this is a win-win for everybody. Last year, I received a grant through the FFA organization, which allowed me to continue to expand my SAE. I plan to purchase an incubator and begin hatching birds to use for shows and to sell to other FFA members for show birds.
So do you hope to keep this going even beyond high school?
Beyond high school, I plan on going to K-State, getting an animal science degree, and then maybe continuing to raise poultry either in egg production or in a hatchery setting, running my own hatchery.
Kansas FFA State Star Farmer Levi Mivas. Levi is the son of Paul and Becky Mivas, his Iola FFA chapter advisor, Amanda Strickler. Renwick FFA member Austin Simon was recognized as the State Star in Agribusiness. Austin's supervised agricultural experience is in agricultural mechanics, design, and fabrication, also focused on the poultry production enterprise.
I've built and sell chicken coops. I've sold over 150 of them. Started out in 7th grade and has just kind of grown from there. Right now, with everything going on, I build 5 to 6 a week. I got 2 different sizes, so I do small coops and large coops. They're all painted, chicken wire, shingled, and I do all that, like I said, in about a week. That's just kind of how it goes.
So you, again, have done this for several years. What got you started on this?
I started off raising rabbits, and I was trying to make a rabbit cage, and it turned into a chicken coop. I decided to sell it on Craigslist locally in Wichita, and I sold the first one and had several phone calls, so I decided to take all that money from that first one and start building the rest, and it's just gone from there. I've sold over 40 this year already.
And as far as how much business you do, is it largely with families that have youth involved in 4-H or FFA projects then?
It just kind of varies. A lot of them are in town. I don't sell to very many people out in the country. But, yeah, there's quite a few that have kids, and they're just trying to get a project started for their younger kids. But then there is older couples that just want a few chickens.
Austin Simon, State Star in Agribusiness from the Renwick FFA. Austin is the son of Kurt and Jennifer Simon, his chapter advisors Cheyenne Holliday and Cody Holliday. And Washington County FFA member Tyler Nelson is the State Star in Agricultural Placement this year. Tyler's SAE is in Agricultural Mechanics, Design, and Fabrication, as he works for Prairie Road Iron in Lynn.
Well, I started at age 13 helping a church member. We started building pipe fence and built some fence-side feed bunks. And after I got done building all that fence, started helping one of my neighbors help repair a hog crate where he worked at. And right now I work for Prairie Road Ironworks, where I started working for cattle fence. Then we also built buffalo fence. And one of our biggest projects I helped them with is at Kansas State University. We built the outer wall of the baseball stadium, along with stainless steel bar tops, power cat gates, and we did some handrail at the track and field. On the side of those jobs, we make custom bumpers, skid loader attachment, and our latest addition to the shop is we are starting to make live repeater traps, where we make rat and cat and coon traps, where they are sold all over the world.
So you've had an opportunity through this experience to really develop your metalworking skills.
I have. Working for Prairie Road Ironworks, you learn a lot. He's taught me how to run the laser, the hydraulic press, hydraulic bender, the hydraulic shear, the roller, sandblasting, powder coating, and general stuff like shop tools like the welder, chop saw, and drill press. So this sounds like something that you could perhaps pursue as a career, or if not that, as a sideline, if you will. Yeah, my plan is to go out to north central Kansas, Beloit, Kansas, and go into welding, and maybe even come back and work for Todd Oldie at Prairie Road Ironworks.
Tyler Nelson, the state star in agricultural placement. Tyler's the son of Craig and Darcy Nelson, and his Washington County FFA chapter advisor is John Kern. Our congratulations to each of those three stars over Kansas. Also on the chapter recognition level, the Udall FFA, under the guidance of their advisor, Aaron Saba, received the prestigious Triple Crown Award. So a tip of the cap to the Udall FFA. And the 2020-21 Kansas FFA State Officer Team was announced. The new state president is Elizabeth Sturgis from the Riverton FFA, Vice President Abigail Johnson from the Southeast of Saline chapter, Secretary Bailey Sipes of the Stanton County FFA, State Treasurer Kieran Elam of the Beloit FFA, the state reporter from the Frankfort FFA, Hattie Polson, and the state sentinel is from the Labette County FFA, Hannah Graybill. Congratulations as well to the new state officer team, and the best to them as they take the helm of the Kansas FFA for this next year ahead. Some highlights there from the virtual 92nd Kansas FFA State Convention, which wrapped up on Friday. And our weekly Kansas 4-H segment is next on Agriculture Today.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so stay a minimum of 6 feet away from others and stay home if you can. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. Beginning today and continuing through the entire month of June, Kansas 4-H youth can participate in a virtual camp. While this can never replace the experience of a trip to Rock Springs, Southwest Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Amy Sollock, whose program support area includes 4-H camping, says that the staff has developed a virtual camping experience that combines education with a variety of fun activities. Amy, there have been so many changes that have had to have been made over the last month to 2 months, and Kansas 4-H has not been spared from having to make those changes. But one of the biggest that you're going through right now is how to take a face-to-face experience and make it a virtual experience when it comes to 4-H camp.
Yeah, we've been camping at Rock Springs, for 75 years, and it's one of our very beloved and time-honored traditions. We love going to camp at Rock Springs, and the benefits that our kids receive from camping at Rock Springs are tremendous, and there's just nothing like it. So, yeah, we're pretty bummed that we're not able to camp this year, but we understand the reasons why, and the health and the safety of our participants and our volunteers and our staff always comes first.
There's a lot of work that goes into doing the regular camp. As I was mentioning, there is a lot of work that has gone into the virtual camp. Talk about some of the things that you hope to be able to do.
Yeah, so we want to, first acknowledge that there's no true way to replicate camp other than going to camp. That immersive camp experience is intense, it's life-changing, and the skills that the kids develop at 4-H camp are incredible in the amount and the intensity of it. So we want to, in a way, we want to acknowledge that we're not there, but we want to celebrate some of our favorite things about camp. And we're going to do just that via social media the entire month of June. We're going to have all kinds of fun content that we're going to push out, some really fun challenges and videos to kind of celebrate what camp is all about.
So some of this they will do together, and some of it they can just do on their own?
Yeah. So we've got our team leaders, our State 4-H Youth Council is going to kick off each week saying the pledges, and we sure hope that kids at home watch and say the pledge right there with us. We're going to have a backyard photography contest, kind of just a real fun, simple way to get kids outside in their backyards. Our State Youth Council is going to do some virtual camp song challenges. We hope it kind of is one of those viral challenges that really takes off and could provide kids a lot of humor across the state as we sing our silly camp songs. And then we're going to do some more intentional sort of historical things, kind of nods to some of our favorite aspects of camp at Rock Springs, from our favorite spots on the campgrounds, which, might include the campfire circle or the water wheel, to the horse barns and the Palomino horse herd. There's got some cool things in the works.
There are some things that they could maybe do as a club through social distancing. They can still maintain that 6-foot space and maybe do some things, as you said, in the evenings together?
Absolutely, yeah. I do know of some local extension units across the state that are trying to do a camp in a box activity where they send out supplies needed to complete certain activities. We will be having service learning opportunities. We have 2 scheduled for the month of June, where we want kids and they could potentially get together with their fellow club members as long as they're, following the guidelines. And we want them to understand, service learning is a part of any good camp experience. So we've got 2 different activities, one where they write letters to some of the essential service providers that have been working so hard these last couple months, and one that gives back to their communities, and it's kind of a beautification effort.
That's a really good point, because although summer camp is really billed as being fun and an experience, there's also a lot of education that goes into the camps.
Absolutely. Outdoor education. We've got some fun video planned for outdoor safety, including sunscreen and bug repellent, the importance of water. We've got a basics of fishing video in the works, a bike safety video. There's a lot of educational content that kids receive at camp, and most of it is geared towards, logging off of a device and getting outside.
And another thing they can do is they can pitch that tent in the backyard as well.
Absolutely. We've seen some really creative efforts from kids and families, volunteers across the state, as we navigate this, situation that none of us have ever lived through before. And there's a lot of fun to be had right in your own backyard.
How can they find out about everything that will be going on, and do they need to register for this? Or are you trying to kind of keep track of who's coming and going?
No, we're not asking for any registration. We are going to start to release, some snippets of previews of what's to come during the month of June. Make sure you follow Kansas 4-H on Facebook, and we're using the hashtag 4-H Camp Lives On. So we'll be able to search and kind of track people if they post, if an activity seems fun to them and they want to post a camp song challenge, or they want to post pledges or a photo they've taken. We're asking everybody to use that hashtag 4-H Camp Lives On.
This is important because, as you mentioned, this is an experience that they look forward to, and the fact that they can at least still participate in some way is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to, give those kids a chance to celebrate what they're missing out on. And we know that camp is a favorite activity for many kids throughout the year.
And the good thing is we hope that this will just be a one-time shot and things will get back to normal next year. And those who weren't able to get the really hands-on experience this year have something to look forward to even more next year.
Absolutely. Camp 2021 is going to, be stronger than ever. And I don't think we'll ever be so excited about a 4-H camping season as we will be in 2021. And
the one good thing is the parents won't have to have any anxiety over their kids packing up and going off for a week.
Yeah. There's always one of 2 parents, the parent that really has a hard time with it and the parent that's happy to send them off for a couple days. It's always much easier for the child than the parent.
They might still want to confiscate the cell phone, but other than that, give them the laptop so that they can take part virtually.
Absolutely.
Sounds like you're working on a plan here that's really going to come through and be of value to the kids.
Yeah, we're really excited. It's been fun. The first week when we kind of came to the realization that camp wasn't going to happen was tough, and I'd be lying if I didn't shed a few tears. But it's going to be okay, and this is going to be the next best thing.
That's Southwest Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Amy Sollock with an update on virtual 4-H camp taking place throughout the month of June. To learn more about 4-H camp, follow Kansas 4-H on Facebook or visit kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.